Insights. This is episode 19, and this is a really good one. We have amazing guests on a great topic. The title for today's episode is, episode 19, is Women Leading Utilities, Discussing Grid Modernization. And I guess I got picked as the moderator. I'm the executive editor of Public Utilities Fortnightly, but I think the reason why I got picked is because I wrote this book, Women Leading Utilities, but not on grid modernization, which is what we're going to do today. And we have three fabulous guests from utilities across the country. I'm just going to say a word about each of them, and then we're going to get right into it. First, we have Elaine Allyn, and she is the manager of OT Network Engineering and Architecture, which sounds really complicated, so she must be really smart, at San Diego Gas and Electric, part of Sempra, in the place where the weather is usually good in California.
Usually good.
And then secondly, we have Shawna Kiesbuy, and she is a senior manager of, she's the senior manager of network engineering at Avista. Now that's also on the West Coast there, but way up. We got San Diego at the bottom and Avista way up in Washington State, if I've got that correct. It's not quite on the coast, it's almost on the coast, right?
That's right, yep, we're inland.
Okay, inland, good. Wait, and then we have our third guest is Sindhu Suresh, and she is at Public Service Electric and Gas in New Jersey, so the other side. And she is the grid platform management lead. So I want to find out what that is. That's a little too complicated for me. So we're going to find that out today at Public Service Electric and Gas, PSEG, in New Jersey. So welcome. This is a great panel, and I'm going to open it up and turn it over to you all and say, I'm going to ask you, tell us about your role, which they all sound pretty technical and pretty complex, and also what motivates you most about your position. So we'll go in that order, alphabetic order. Elaine Allyn from San Diego Gas and Electric, you're up.
I get pulled first because I start with an A. There you go. At San Diego Gas and Electric, we service both San Diego Gas and Electric and SoCal Gas. My department does. I manage the OT network, which is Operational Technology Network Communications Group. It's a group of architects and engineers. My team mostly focuses on the electric and gas grids, distribution and transmission sides. We also work with our emergency communications groups. So a lot of the emergency communication teams work with us as well because you need networking communications for those. We work on finding strong long-term network communication solutions for both SDG&E and SoCal Gas, while hopefully ensuring reliability, resiliency, and above all, cost effectiveness. So what motivates me about this is I really enjoy problem solving. Quite honestly, I really enjoy working with the various business teams that handle our grid, our emergency communications, and coming up with solutions that help them modernize their grid, that help them address any emergency situations, that really focus towards making their life easier, right? And I like problem solving.
Wow, so that's great, Elaine. You have I don't know how you have time for a webinar. You have a really big job. That's really good. Okay, now Shawna, I don't know if you can compete here with Elaine. She has a very impressive job, and also talk to us about what motivates you most in what you do.
Sure. My name's Shawna Kiesbuy. I'm with Avista Utilities, and we are inland. We're in Spokane, Washington, so about 300 miles inland from the coast. And we serve gas and electric customers in Washington and Idaho, and then also gas customers in Oregon. I'm the senior manager of network engineering, and that team consists of about 35 full-time contractors and employees, all dedicated to developing and implementing an effective network systems program so that our business functions and our customers can benefit from reliable, equitable, and secure network architecture. Sounds very similar to what Elaine's doing. Essentially, I am motivated by my team. They work, for me, it's always about the people, and my team works so hard daily to deliver every single day, and they really drive me to grow and learn and help solve problems, to remove their roadblocks, to provide guidance and direction, and really encourage them through the next challenge. And there are many. So.
Okay, well, third but not least, Sindhu. Now you're representing the entire East Coast.
Yeah.
So what's your job about, and also what motivates you most?
So hi everyone. I am Sindhu Suresh. So I am the platform lead. I know two of my colleagues here are from networking, so slightly different from their background. I am leading the Advanced Management Distribution System, otherwise known as ADMS, in PSEG, and I am responsible for the distribution side of electric network. So mostly from the automation and control side. So it belongs to the operational technology, as Elaine has mentioned. She also works in the OT side of the network, OT side of the utility side. So what is ADMS platform? As Steve asked the question, he wants to know more about platform. Platform is more like a horizontal layer of automation control system for the critical infrastructure. So you can consider that as a conductor of an orchestra, which helps to coordinate everything on it. So developing, enhancing, managing the critical infrastructure is what motivates me the most in my job. For us, as we are responsible for the SCADA system, it's every day is challenging, and each challenge opens to more technical opportunities where my team, it's all about my team. They work really hard, diligent, brainstorm, and come up with new solutions, which makes each day in my, of my life very interesting. So I joined PSEG 16 months only now. So before that, I was a researcher in Siemens Corporate for over 10 years. So what excited me most is how I can bring those research, which I did in Siemens, into this utility, which is a real world.
Yeah, wow, that's great. I should have paid attention in computer science class. Of course, when I took computer sciences, it was before computers. So it was a really long time ago. Okay, now we just came off of celebrating International Women's Day. I know that happened when I was at CERAWeek, and it was a big party. So that was really great. And a whole month, Women's History Month. So there's a lot of fantastic history, including in our industry. Edith Clark, read my book. She's in there. So, okay. So let's go to each of you and talk about how's your career developed to where you came to today. And also if you had any mentors or people, that gave you a turning point in your career to get to where you are now. Elaine, you're first.
Oh, all right, I am. Well, let's see. I've always been in dealing with computers, with networking, with programming, all through my life. Even in college, so Steve, even in college, most of my computer science departments were dominated by men. I was definitely one of the few women that were involved in those classes, and consequently in my career path, right? Mostly men in my career path. I would say that some of the strengths that I pulled from were I was raised, I'm a military brat. I was raised by a father who actually was very encouraging and told me that I belonged in the room just like everybody else did, right? And that I could do anything. And so the ability to not be intimidated or shy away from a room full of men is important. To be able to talk to all different types of stakeholders, that ability has served me very well throughout my career, and I believe has brought me where I am, because I can speak with not only technical people, but also people that don't have technical backgrounds, and that's been a huge asset for me. And I think the biggest thing that I've taken from all of this is you need to be fearless. You need to be able to stand up and ask those questions, no matter how dumb you may think they will be, because there's somebody else in the room who's got that same question. And it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. I mean, you can do what you need to do, right? And let that smart show through, right? You got to be smart and let that show through. And that's always served me well. And believe it or not, most of my mentors through life have been men who have been very encouraging, supportive of me, and has shown me that it doesn't matter what sex I am, I can do it.
Wow. Okay, Elaine, fearless and smart. Now, Shawna, what's your take on how your career developed, and also were there any mentors or turning points for you?
Sure, sure. So I was raised by a single mom. She was very gritty, and my sister was about 5 years younger than I. So it was just the two of us and my mom. And I learned very early by my mom and my mom's actions. She was just a can-do kind of woman. She still is. And she was fearless in the way that she raised my sister and I, single mom, working mom, and a lot of what I do today and I take from her, and the way that she raised us. That, you know, it was always, you can do whatever you want, whatever you put your mind to, and you belong in the room. And I have felt that way always. There have always been, you know, little glitches along the way, but I've never felt that I didn't belong. And that continued into my early 20s. Very early in my career journey, I had the great fortune to work for a gentleman who was actually, he really challenged me to think outside of the box in a corporate setting. He was my first VP of engineering and operations. And, you know, although he didn't tell me until much later in our friendship, he knew how difficult the road was going to be for me, being a young woman in a corporate environment. And he was much more mature in his career, right? He had been there, done that, so to speak. And so he knew it was going to be challenging for me, but he was always trying to encourage me to stand tall, look beyond the obvious, bring everybody in the room into the conversation. And, you know, fast forward 25 years, he's retired, but we still meet up several times a year, and, you know, we catch up, we reminisce. I consider him a mentor, a coach. He's a little bit like the father that I never had. He's a very dear friend, and truly, he was a mentor, even though we didn't always work together. Right? He retired some time ago, and I just sort of kept along my path. But I've always felt like he's had my back near and far, wherever we might be. And, you know, sometimes when I get into those situations where I'm a little bit unsure, I just think about my mom, or I think about him as my mentor, and, you know, how to continue the path, right? Challenge my way through it.
Okay, Shawna belongs in the room. That was great. Now, Sindhu, what about you? How did and you were at Siemens too, so that's a you know, big and really competitive organization too. So how did your career develop, and did you have any mentors as well?
Yeah, so my mentor is my father. I heard Elaine also saying that. And, you know, I don't know, somehow my father always say, you can do everything. So that's just the word I always resonate in my ears. And after I got married, it's my husband. So I agree that most of the time men are our good allies and they support a lot. I'm from India, as you can, you know, it's a very different country, and I come from the southern part of India, which is, I'm from a village. So it all creates a lot of difficulties when I was growing up. most important career for women who at that time was teaching. So everybody assumes that you go to high school, you teach. But I wanted to be an engineer because there was an engineering college near my house. So I used to think, why can't I be an engineer? And my father said, yeah, sure, why not? You can be an engineer too. Even though some of my relatives were not agreeing to that, it was long back. So I chose electrical engineering because because of the power issues. As we are all from utilities, we want 24/7 electricity, but that was not the case when I was growing up. 25% of the time I never had power. So I wanted to do something which I faced as a difficulty while growing up. I did high voltage engineering, which is not something women pursue. And I studied in Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, where all my classmates, I was only the one female in high voltage engineering, and which was very difficult for me to adapt to that situation. So that was the first time, you face as a female the difficulties in the laboratory work and all those things. So I'm happy now that the new Women's International Day, their theme is embracing equity and then achieving equality. I feel like, if I had those situations there, environment ready for me at that time, it would have helped me a lot, but I survived through it. So I believe like if you can speak up, if you have confidence in what you are doing, you will always be successful irrespective of your gender, race, or whatever, right? There is a difference on the thinking process or the cultural and social aspects which you grow up from. But I always believe if I am the only one in the room as a woman, I think I'm the smartest. That's why I'm here with you all. Otherwise, why should I be here? So that's how I make sure that, yes, I am the smartest. I can do it, and why not? And sometimes I may not be the expert. I have no issue in asking people for help. They may feel like, why is she asking? It doesn't matter to me because I don't know. That's why I'm asking. So I always say to my daughter, I have a daughter, she's also pursuing engineering. Speak up, be confident on what you do. It's not necessary that you know everything in the world. You definitely doesn't know some things. You should learn that and accept your mistakes. Learn from the mistakes. Being a woman, sometimes we don't want to do that. And sometimes people say, oh, you are emotionally driven, not intelligently driven. And I prove to them, no, we have IQ and EQ at the same level.
Oh, that's great. I particularly love, the word confidence, but also hearing about you being from South Asia. My daughter's in the industry in electric utilities in Japan, in East Asia. So there's a couple of challenges there too. That she's working out pretty well. Okay, now this episode is supposed to be about grid modernization. We haven't even touched upon that yet, so we have to dive into that. So we're going to talk about grid modernization. We want to hear about what your companies are doing in this area, which are your companies are really leaders. So that'll be, and also how you specifically are involved in that. Move to grid modernization. Elaine, Allyn, you're first again. Sorry, the alphabet, rules here.
I'm used to it. Okay, I'm used to it.
Go for it.
Big topic, obviously, grid modernization. I can focus in on my area with it and let you know how we're leaning in there. I will tell you that in 2023, network communications is a huge base for grid modernization. It is a way for companies to be able to actively monitor their grid, actively do active rerouting, to be able to see what's happening at a moment's notice, troubleshooting, possibly remote troubleshooting. But it's also a way to help companies not only react quickly, but save time, serve our customers meaningfully and quickly. So it is a huge topic, but it is something where network communications is an essential part of it. My team really leans in with all the other business groups that even touch any part of our grid, whether it be the electric or gas, but any part of our company that touches the grid, all the way from the main distribution sites out to the customer, right? And we really look at solutions along the way to be able to help with all those aspects, dynamic rerouting, everything that they need, being able to look at falling conductor protection when something is happening at a moment's notice, and to be able to try to troubleshoot it to know, do we need to dispatch somebody out there? Is it something we can do remotely? There's a lot of topics that our group handles to help with that modernization. I think a real strong point of network communications for company is it is a more cost-effective way of monitoring your grid, right? Because you can do things remotely without having to dispatch. In the old days, they would have to dispatch out if something happened. Sometimes customers were out of service for quite a long time. And now we can reroute at a moment's notice, be able to give customer service and address the problems that are out there without a lot of downtime, which is huge on our resiliency, right? And so network communication really helps with that. And our team is really leaning into that to work with teams to really help them come along in that area. We are implementing our own private wireless broadband network. What we've found is our utility solutions are either through traditional carrier wireless services and or proprietary, depending upon what that solution is. And for a large utility, you end up having a lot of different groups supporting all these different types of technologies and wireless networks. We're deploying our private broadband. We're about 3 years into it, so we're still relatively young and new at this. However, it is helping us to consolidate our networks, to have not so many maintenance groups, not so many personnel out there with all these different knowledge bases, to combine networks in and really to leverage what wireless carriers and is a standard out there for the industry, right? We're able to leverage some of that technology rather than go to these proprietary type solutions. So yeah, that's a lot of what our company has been doing towards leaning into grid modernization.
Yeah, and I always think that of your companies, the Sempra companies, the SoCal Gas also, San Diego,
Yes.
is very technological leaders. So you're doing all this fancy stuff, the falling conductors. But before we switch from you, we forgot to mention that the CEO of one of your companies, San Diego Gas and Electric, is the great Caroline Wynn. So we have a woman that's the CEO.
Yes, we do.
That's pretty good.
It is awesome.
Okay, switching to Shawna, grid modernization. Avista is also like doing a lot of stuff, and the state has all sorts of goals that you're moving towards as well. So talk about that, and particularly the role of what you do and your group of 35 or so folks, which is a key part of it, right?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I love this conversation because in listening to Sindhu and Elaine, I hear a lot of similarities in what's happening. Avista, as a lot of folks know, we're one of the smallest investor-owned utilities here in the US, but we are mighty when it comes to innovation. A few years back, our then CEO, Scott Morris, he really led intentional investments into our Energy Innovation Lab. And today we have several teams working on innovations in distributed energy renewables, connected communities, digital substation solutions. And as our traditional engineering teams really grow in this space, it's imperative that we include traditionally tech teams such as security and networks, and that we bring all of those folks together in those lab type environments. And really, these innovations need strong people partnerships who believe in the mission of grid modernization and digital transformations at the same time. I appreciate where Elaine was coming from. I know you said 3 years into this next private wireless network. We're not quite there yet. I would say we're at the edge, right? Trying to decide what's next. But to the comments that she was making, it really is, communication networks are the base layer, right? They are the foundation that connects everything else. When you think about the digital transformations of the future and where we are today, everyone talks about IoT this and smart that. And I tell folks all the time across the organization, these devices are not smart unless they have networks, right? These networks communicate and they pull all of the data from all of these devices together so that people can use that data to better serve our customers and to serve one another. And we're continuing to augment and to grow our network architectures. We're always looking at existing investments and making sure that that life cycle management is happening. And at the same time, what's next, right? Where does the future take us? And how do these private networks, really it's the control of control, how do these private networks allow us to lean into the future and into these digital transformations? And again, a lot of that work that our teams, our traditionally tech teams, security and network, in working with the other engineers across the organization, substation engineers, distribution, transmission, generation, bringing all of those groups together, traditionally tech and traditional engineers, in that really that energy, really that space of the future.
Yeah, wow. Well, okay, so that's, plus we came up with a new tagline for your company. You'll have to mention it to your comms people. Avista, we're mighty. That is so great. That is going to be the new tagline. Okay. Sindhu, how about you? So, you know, in New Jersey too, and PSEG, boy, you are doing a lot. That company's doing a lot in grid transformation. And there's a lot going on in New Jersey too, and you're in the center of it. So what do you do, and you know, to move this along, and give us a sense of the overall PSEG, you know, kind of path.
Yeah, sure. And Shawna, I think I pronounced you correctly, right? Shawna, or is it correct?
Yes.
I just want to make sure. Avista was, I just want to say that Avista was actually part of one of the consortium which was developing grid modernization for India. So I worked with a professor from Washington State University, and I see Avista and I'm like, oh my God, they're doing a lot of things. So I'm so happy that you're supporting developing countries too. So
Awesome.
for me, from New Jersey side, as I said, I worked as a researcher for many, many years in grid modernization, and I agree completely with Elaine on the networking and on Shawna on the networking side. But before we jump into the networking, we really need to make sure our devices are capable of even communicating that data back, right? Once I have the data, I need a layer of transportation to carry that, and that's what you both are providing for us. So PSEG is in the process of grid modernization. We started with our Energy Strong 2 project, which was basically making our infrastructure ready enough to embrace grid modernization by installing RTUs and some monitoring systems. Again, we depend on networking side of our PSEG to bring this data back into the database architecture structure, whatever we define. So for every company or for every utilities, grid modernization is a different terminology, right? I say grid modernization more from a customer perspective or more from an optimization control perspective. For some others, it may be more of how do you make it more cleaner, energy efficiency, like that. So PSEG's goal is powering progress vision, in which our customers uses less energy and energy used is cleaner and delivered more reliable than ever. So it's so many words there, but for each word, we need to make it cleaner. We need to bring more distributed energy resources into picture. We need to bring more efficiency program. And for making it more reliable, we need strong network, and also our field devices should be capable of delivering that data. So in 2022 June, we got BPU approval for modernization of our electric circuit, making our substations more intelligent in actions. and we are now in the process of doing it. So in my platform or my EDMS platform as a lead, what I do is all these data points which are being communicated from the field has to reach the OT network, and it should be utilized for making some decisions, right? That's what my team is right now working on. So a lot of installations going in the field of field devices, a lot of monitoring is in the progress, but at the end, how do you bring all of them into the OT environment? How do you make sure your database and architecture and processing is fast enough so that we can make a real-time decision on the system? So other things which we are working right now are on the real-time digital simulators. So RTDS, basically based on what, we are trying to create a digital twin for our field devices. So when you get the data, you try to see how the twin is predicting, and is that something you can, feed back into your real-time operations. So we are advancing in those areas. But again, the foundation is the field, then comes the networking, then comes the database architecture, then comes the process in place. So we are going in different layers. That's what we as a company is doing.
Wow, okay. Okay, now let's drill down, as they say. Elaine, you talked about communication, and that seems like a key. I don't know much about that subject, but Sindhu talked about how it needs to be fast enough to make decisions. And then we're talking about massive amounts of data, and we're putting sensors on everything. So I don't know how you can deal with all of that. But an area that I also feel is really important is security, because there's all sorts of bad folks out there that want to mess with the security of our communications. So take us through how you see the importance of the communication side of this, and also what qualities should communications have? It seems really complicated to laymen like myself.
Well, it is complicated.
Oh, great. Okay, I give up.
Sorry. There are a lot of concerns out there. There are a lot of concerns, a lot of things that we have to keep track of to be able to effectively do some of the projects that we're doing, right? And cybersecurity is a huge concern. We have a whole team dedicated to just cybersecurity, right? Because that is a large concern of ours, as it is for most utilities, and I would even bet most companies across the country, right? So we are in our private wireless broadband network that we're implementing. It does give us some controls over the cybersecurity, right? And being able to migrate stuff to that gives us some inherent roadblocks or a box around our area that is just exclusively us, right? And that's appealing because it gives us the chance to be able to really effectively secure things and have some intrusion detection that before it even gets to where it might do some damage, right?
Elaine,
And so,
sorry to interrupt, but is that what you mean by private? Because you kept saying private.
Right. What I mean by private is it is a broadband network that is just us.
Oh.
And we will be the only ones traveling on that particular bandwidth and that particular megahertz bandwidth, right?
Oh.
And so yes, that is what I'm talking about. So if you think about it in terms, Steve, just so you can think about it, you have your Verizons of the world, you have your AT&Ts, you have your T-Mobiles. Each of them travels on a broadband spectrum, on a particular broadband spectrum, and that's been approved by the FCC, and it's gone through all of that. Well, we are going to have our own, Sempra will, so that we won't have any interference from anybody else. It helps us really encapsulate things, but it also opens up a huge area of possibilities for us as well, right? Because not only is it going to help us with decreasing our maintenance costs, with maybe downsizing from some of the traditional carrier services that we pay a lot for and use our own private, but it also gives us that extra layer of security to be able to implement all these different types of use cases. And a lot of it is really going around our different, going around SEMPRA, San Diego Gas and Electric, SCG, SEMPRA headquarters, and really talking about what kind of benefit this is going to give to our company. And then we have all these use cases just coming out of the woodwork, wanting to be able to be on this because it is a good solution for them, right? And it is something where we are really going to have to make sure that we account for all of those and can effectively use them, because there is a lot of security out at the sites. There's a lot of bandwidth that's needed for different types of particular applications. I mean, we're looking at things where we have a sole worker out in the field. How do we keep track of them? How do we monitor them? How do we get them the data that they need in a very quick amount of time so that they are effectively doing their job out there, but we're keeping them safe at the same time? And so those are the types of solutions that we're looking at. That's an example of the type of solutions that we're looking at for our private broadband.
Yeah.
Along with the grid modernization.
Okay, now, Shawna, communications at Avista, I know it's more than, you're past the dial rotary phone thing. You don't call people up, send us some data. So how does communications work at Avista?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the rotary phone, because there is this, telecommunications disruption that's happening, right? Where a lot of communication networks are moving from TDM to IP, right? So it's a technology change. And with utilities, Avista's been around over 130 years, and many of our communications are still in those TDM spaces. And so we are building out, and there are a lot of architectural changes that we're making to essentially bring those communications platforms up to date so that we can look into the future for those communications needs. And it always comes down to reliability. I love what Elaine was talking about. One of the big reasons that you move to a private network, like she's talking about, right, where it's yours, you own it, is the reliability. The Verizons of the world, AT&Ts of the world, other leased service providers, it might be a local carrier where you are leasing some type of service. It might just be the last mile, or it might be some service from some entity. Their business models are not always based on the same essential service business model that a utility is based on. So when they perform network maintenance or other activities in their networks, it can disrupt our own network, and that happens. So that's one of the reasons that a lot of utilities look to private, because it's control of the control, right? We control when we maintain the networks, we control when we support them, and that works better in an essential service environment.
Yeah, okay.
Very good, Shawna, absolutely.
Now, Sindhu, you're not so much a communications person, but maybe we'll plunge into the next question, and you get to go.
I want to add something to Elaine and Sean, because I'm not
a
networking person, but I am the user of the other side of it.
Yeah.
And as Elaine was describing this private network, we used to have so many issues with Verizon recently, and then, the network going down. And luckily, our SCADA systems are not based on the radio network or even that one, so we didn't have a problem, but we did have problems on other side. So I'm so happy to hear what Elaine was talking about private network. And in Colombia, when I teach, I always ask the students, why do we use 4G and 5G, and how do you differentiate and all those things? And I feel like you may be all network experts here. 5G is something which is already passed and people have already researched about it, but still the jittering or the losing of the data is a problem. This is all what I learned from talking to people on 5G and 4G. And one another thing is, as soon as I get the data, I can do my decision. So as fast, how much is the latency? How is the bandwidth going to be? I feel like you both are doing a great job in making sure we receive the data in the correct bandwidth, latency, no packet losses, and thousands of cybersecurity monitoring tools looking at each packet, which again needs its own bandwidth for monitoring purpose. So I'm so happy that I'm with the two experts and hearing it.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I'm actually feeling good about Verizon because they just delivered our new TV set boxes. So they did that pretty well. I don't know. Okay, now we're gonna go. There's a lot of transformation going on, and we have the challenge of the, tough storms. Maybe some of the effects of climate change are increasing. There's a lot of challenges that the utilities are facing now, and the federal government, Washington D.C., where I am, I don't have the money, but they do, and there's got the Inflation Reduction Act. I think that's right, the IRA, and then, by the way, I was at a conference and they said the IRA, but then it was a British utility guy, and they don't like that term IRA.
No,
So,
right.
so there's the Inflation Reduction Act, and then there's the IIJA, which I cannot remember what that stands for. So there's a lot of opportunities out here for utilities to do some interesting things and breakthrough things. So I want to turn to that. Elaine, are you all at on both sides, San Diego Gas and Electric and SoCal Gas? Are you looking at some of that stuff and maybe taking advantage of that in California?
Yeah, absolutely. We always are, I would say. We are. We're San Diego Gas and Electric in particular has always been on the forefront with alternative sources of fuel, right? We're big on clean energy. We have a huge portion of our energy portfolio is from clean energy, whether it be solar or wind, but we're also looking at different types of alternatives. Of course, the DERs, the distributed energy resources. We're doing battery sites for particular areas so that if there's a fluctuation in the grid, we can pull from a huge battery site to help that grid in high times, right? We have alternative fuels. We're looking at hydrogen. We're doing pilots with that. There's a lot of really exciting things that are happening that are going on to be able to help with grid modernization, but also help with supplying energy to our customers and making sure that they have a source of energy at all different times, right?
Yeah, and some of a lot of these things that these programs may involve, they mean you all are going to get a lot
Absolutely
more to do as far as the data, EV charging, right? Oh, that's complicated. First of all, managing that so everybody doesn't go charge at the same time, and is it when the sun is shining or it's not? And then two-way charging, that's even more complicated. They're sending stuff back to the grid. So that's just more data and more management, isn't it, Elaine?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it uses, like, as we've mentioned before, I mean, network communications is a base for all of this, right?
Yeah.
It is the backbone, if you will, to ensure that all of these different types of uses and use cases are operating correctly, are really doing what they need to be doing, giving us the feedback so that we can research, make them better. And all of that is dependent upon a good, strong network communication backbone. And that is the charge of my group, right? Is to ensure that that is happening and that is there.
Yeah. Okay, Shawna, you're next. Maybe things are easy your way, but that's what I'm about. There's a lot going on at your place too. I know, because I hear, and at Puff we've written some stories. Microgrids and battery storage is coming on, and there's these federal funding programs. Have you seen any of that, or is your company getting involved in any of that?
Yes, we, in fact, just 2 weeks ago, we finished up, as you said, IIJA, right? So the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
Jobs Act.
And we just submitted 2 grants, and Avista did, we being Avista. And the network team was right smack in the middle of that, which I was very happy to participate, because sometimes, and it's not intentional, but sometimes people forget the network, right? There's just this assumption that it's kind of always there. And so we were right in the middle of it, which I felt really great about, which says a lot of things about the people and the relationships that we're creating internally across departments. And one of those grants was looking towards the digital substation of the future. And so in working with our traditional engineering teams, you know, there are a lot of logistics that go into that conversation, but our network team was able to really sit down and talk with some of those teams about, depending on what substation they may choose, right? Should we get this money? Should we get this federal grant? Let's make sure that we have the networks in place to really deliver on the needs of a digital substation, right? Kind of going back to some of those older or antiquated technologies. If you're looking at a substation that's currently served, you know, just with SCADA telemetry circuits with some sort of 2-wire or 4-wire circuit, that's not going to cut it for the digital substation needs of the future, because of some of those things that Sindhu and Elaine were talking about, right? Latency and load requirements. And so we actually were participating in those conversations, and you know, we'll see where that goes. But it was a lot of fun to sit down with the engineers across the organization to say, okay, if these are your needs at this substation, let's roll that up and take a look at what a reliable network infrastructure would look like to serve those needs into the future.
Well, I think after people see this program, you're going to get those 2 proposals. You're going to win those. Okay, Sindhu, what about you? Are you hearing about some of this IRA and IIJA things? Is PSEG looking at that and maybe getting involved in a couple?
I will take a slight turn on it, because as I said, I was in PSEG for only 16 months, and those you both will agree that that's very short time to get accustomed to an utility culture and, you know about everything what's happening. I mentioned that I worked as a researcher in Siemens Corporate for more than 11 years, and all I was doing was federal-based research projects with different utilities. And I was lucky that I was able to work with Hawaii Electric and Holy Cross Energy, where in this case, we are researchers working with the utility who really sees the problem from a networking or from a control side. And we came up with the different types of control strategies based on ARPA-E, which is one of the federal grant, and also from Department of Energy funding. And I was also lucky that I worked with the national labs also in bringing up new technologies. So whenever we go for federal grant, people say which TRL level you are in. Are you on a technology readiness level of 1 to 6? You need utility to support, but utility is not ready to put it into their grid until they prove it, right? Now I'm not talking as a utility person, more as a researcher, and we had so much difficulty in getting the buy-in from utilities to believe us so that we can put those things. So from my perspective, I feel like TRL 7, technology readiness level 7 to 9, definitely you need a utility in place. And I'm so happy that Elaine and Shawna are talking about different initiatives they are working with. So from my perspective as a researcher, which I'm also trying to instill here in PSEG, is we need to be part of these consortiums or the research lab or universities, so that you can influence their research rather than waiting for the end result. And then you're like, oh, it doesn't work in my network. No, it's not how things work here in real world. So recently, like you can see that data analytics is one of the most important and maybe the most low-hanging fruit, because it is something which doesn't affect the utility directly, but you can take insights from it and try to build up models and learn from it. So there was something from federal government, Department of Energy recently granted some of the researchers and universities with a phase 1 and phase 2 approach. In phase 1 approach, they will come up with their idea with an utility, and in phase 2, if they win with that idea, right? I mean, it's a phased approach, then you will implement it. So I was so excited because this was won by one of my colleague who was with Siemens, but definitely I wasn't there. You know, I left them, but I felt like that's a very good approach of the federal government, how they can use their money to, get these things in place. So from a PSCG side, right now, my understanding is most of our fundings are coming from BPU. And like Shawna mentioned about the, digitalization of substation, we call it intelligent substation. Matter of fact is it's all about data, all about bringing the data in and doing it. On a long run, I feel like Elaine mentioned about microgrid, battery, all those things. Protection coordination is the most difficult part with the bidirectional flow. How do you ensure protection coordination? How fast it has to be? In a matter of fact, if you have any loss of data, how do you ensure that protection coordination can be put in place? Like you cannot use your traditional style of protection when you have bidirectional flow. So my understanding is federal government is in the pursuit of finding the low-hanging fruits, and to an extent, when you have I don't know, the world in 2050, maybe all about clean energy, bidirectional flow, and distributed LMP or something where even your power prices are based on your house. That's my vision of how I look at this whole thing. Is paradigm is changing, but I believe all the utilities are doing their groundwork. So now we are working with some universities to bring up what are the different technologies we as an utility in East Coast have to look at, as our demography is totally different and geographically we are different. But and at the long run, I'll say that every utility, irrespective of where they are, they should actually work with different research facilities to understand. So together we can change the world. It's not.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Switch gears. We're nearing the end, but I have to ask this question is, so there was a webinar last year, one of these, that Anterix hosts. I think at last year's Women's History Month. And there was an insight that they said, I better read this, make sure I get this right. You have to see her to become her. And I don't know if you've heard that quote before, but okay, you have to, I haven't heard of that, I must admit. You have to see her to become her. What does that quote mean to you? Elaine, you're first.
So let me generalize that a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's about visualization, right? I've been an athlete most of my life, and I will tell you that is a key component of most successful athletes is that they visualize the race, they visualize the event that they're going to be in and how they're going to do in it before they do it, right? And it's really setting your intention, visualizing you can do this, right? And I think that applies to everyday life, right? And especially career desires. When you visualize what your long-term goal is or where you want to be, even if you have a difficult meeting, anything, if you visualize it ahead of time, it helps set your mind, set your intention, and you can do it.
Shawna, what about you? You have to see her to become her. What does that mean to you?
I completely agree with Elaine. I see it as a vision statement, right? And I take it a little bit different, but similar in that, we've all talked about growing up through our careers, and there having been a lot of men, and we've had a lot of male mentors in our careers, and in mine in particular. And there weren't a lot of women in leadership roles as I was sort of growing through this space. And so seeing her to become her, if you visualize and then you look around for those women in leadership roles, they haven't always been there. Yeah. And so I'm proud to be in this space today, And hopefully I can be one of those leaders that other younger women see when they think of who they want to become in a leadership role.
Yeah. 3 of the 5 largest utilities in the country have women as CEOs today.
Yeah.
Julie Sloat
pretty cool.
at AEP, Patty Poppy at PG&E, Lynn Good at Duke, and
Mhm.
actually the other 2 are Black men. So there's some changes going on. Okay,
Yeah.
Sindhu, you have to see her to become her. You
It's
got the last
difficult
word.
after Elaine and Shawna now to see what can I say different from both of them, because it's the difficulty of being last.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So I think I agree with both Elaine and Sean on the vision statement. And for me, I always think, wow, she can be or he can be that. Why can't I be? That's how I always think. And then I try to read about them and see what qualities am I missing, what qualities I have to develop. Because if I don't see myself in next 5 years, I cannot aim for that 5 years, right? I don't know what I'm aiming for. So I always have a checklist. So I need to do X, Y, Z because I wanted to become something. So this is how I used to, that's how I was from the beginning of my childhood. And I actually look more outside of utility too. Sometimes I see influential people and I used to think, how did they become so influential? And what are their, charisma? What are their qualities which makes others, to follow them, right? So Indra Nui is one of my role model from IBM. Like I used, no, from Coca-Cola. Like I used to read about her because she came from the same situation like me, and we have the same side of cultural background. And look where she is. So her book, one of my friend gave me that book and said, you start reading it, then you will understand how to reach there. But you always need a goal. You always need a vision. We achieve or not is the second part of it.
Okay, this is it. This is your last chance to your closing words. It could be more on that grid modernization or your own careers, or actually maybe advice to hopefully there's a lot of women that are watching this as well as guys that are saying, wow, I'd like to be like Elaine, Shawna, and Sindhu someday. So maybe some advice too. Elaine, what do you think there? Your closing thoughts.
My closing thoughts. So I have a couple of closing thoughts there, if you will. First of all, let's focus on the grid modernization real quick. I would say that utilities are a different brand of company, and I think in the outside world of utilities, a lot of companies are intimidated by them, right, and don't want to deal with them. And I think that in the world, especially of private broadband, but with network communications, there's a lot of opportunities for companies to work with the utility. We have a lot of regulation that we have to deal with, but there's a whole host of a world out there, right? And utilities are eager to get the latest and the greatest and implement them and use those devices and or different end use cases to ensure that we are doing the best we can for our customers, right? And ensuring that we are a reliable, resilient grid for them. So that would be my closing thought there as far as grid modernization. As far as advice for women, I think my biggest advice is stay true to yourself, stay true to your heart, and never give up. Know that you are worthy of being in the room, and you're in the room for a reason. They invited you there for a reason, and so make it known what that reason is.
Shawna, how about you? Last word there.
Sure. I'm gonna go back to the people. For me, it's always about the people. I do get a little concerned about our people pipeline, if you will, in the energy industry. We've got a lot of really exciting things going on. I mean, just listening here in this last hour, we are in the midst of a digital transformation, and it's pretty significant, and we need the people to help drive that and help take it to the next place. And so I am constantly looking for and constantly trying to encourage the people to join any energy industry, wherever it might be. Of course, I'd love for them to come to Avista, but anywhere across the country, we have a lot to do in this industry. And I am very encouraged by the people and bringing the people in to move this industry forward.
And in the interview, I bet you ask them how you pronounce the word Spokane or Spokane.
Yes.
Because I
And
would
it's a
definitely fail that. Spokane, okay.
All about the can. Yep.
Okay, go there. That's a great place to go. Beautiful part of the country. Okay, Sindhu, last word there.
I think I have two, one on the grid modernization, as Elaine said, it's a technical, social, and cultural changes, not only for the utilities, but also for the society. So it's very important for us as an utility to make sure our community or our society is understanding what are we trying to do and why are we trying to do. So it's more of an education thing for the community or the society where we live. And it demographically and geographically, it's different for all utilities, but I feel like we as an utility stays together and we share our best practices, lessons learned from different initiatives. We work with different universities, researchers, whoever is trying to do there, we together can do it. So that's my perspective on grid modernization. And from the people or on the soft side, I'll say that you be the change. Don't look for people to make a change for you, irrespective of your gender, race, anything. You be the change, and if you are not the change, then you cannot help yourself. So be the change, and people will follow you. If the change has an influence, if the change is not good, people will give you some, tips and tricks to overcome that. And as Sean said, I encourage women to go to engineering. I go to every different schools in New Jersey. I preach about engineering. I tell them engineering is more than just coding. It is a lot of other aspects in it. You don't have to worry about coding. We do very cool things. At the end of the day, every other companies can work because we are providing electricity to you. And who provides electricity and gas? It's us. So come and work with us. Utility is the best place to do those things for the community.
It's so great when sometimes people ask me, how is the industry different from when I started in 1978 through the 80s and so forth? And I think the industry is so much more dynamic, so much more leading edge and transformation for the customer, for the people of the United States. And then also there's so much more, there was all guys. Seriously, there was none of you all there. And so it's also much more diverse. There's women leading the way and other diverse groups too. I think somehow that's connected. All that diversity and all that dynamic aspects, that's got to be related somehow. Thank you so much for participating, Elaine, Shawna, Sindhu. Thanks for doing this program.
Thank you.
Thank you.